It's like a 30-pound ape.
What's going on, y'all? Welcome back to another episode of Dauntless Outdoors. Little sneak peek. Some AJs, some APs. You can't really see them down there, but there's one. Got a lot more. Jordan shot a cobia. He didn't shoot anything. But I'll see you guys out there. What's going on, y'all? It's Josh. I just hopped in the water, and this ended up being our first and only spot of the day. I did a few drops, and this is the first one that I actually saw African Pompano on. That was the target fish of this trip. And I saw how close they were letting me get to them and how calm they were. So I didn't want to chase them, because if you start chasing the school of them around, then they're not really going to be as comfortable around you, and they won't really give you an easy shot. So didn't push them too hard. Got back up to the surface, did a breathe up, and I kind of knew what general direction they swam into, in coordination with the wreck. So I went that direction, and as soon as I got down here, started grunting. One of them swam right up to me, gave me a really easy shot, and I was pretty happy with how this one turned out. Not a giant, but definitely a nice way to start out the day. Thank you. So I got that guy, and I went to go back down and dive, but I saw Jordan, which is the owner of Tuso Spearguns, which a lot of the people I dive with end up shooting those guns. So it's pretty cool to finally meet him and put a face to the owner of that. But he went down, shot that cobia, and now I went down to just check and see if his cobia had a good enough shot, and it had a plenty fine shot, and there was a really nice AJ. He was probably about 75 pounds or so, and I knew I had to take a shot. So I just swam down there, got a shot in him, and started pulling as hard as I could. But unfortunately, this fish did get into the wreck, and I didn't end up landing him. He got all the way down there, and I think it's about 155 feet to the bottom. So definitely not getting down there to pull an AJ out of a wreck. So left my gun in the boat tied off, kind of hoping that fish was going to end up pulling itself out, but that never happened. So I just ended up sharing a gun with Troy all day. So now I'm down here with Troy's gun, looking around, and he told me this gun shoots a little low. It's not because the actual gun, it's because the shaft. It has a weird notch on the top flopper, and it ends up pushing the shaft low. So I knew to aim a little bit high, but I aimed not nearly high enough, and I barely hit this fish in the bottom. But luckily, African Pompano have a really firm gut cavity, and it's mainly all bone, even the bottom part of it. So I knew the shot was gonna hold because I've hit a lot of fish in that area, especially on farther shots. So I wasn't too worried about it, and I started heading up, kind of pulling on him, and Troy started pulling. Typically, if you have a bad shot, you kind of want to not pull too hard, which ends up happening a little bit later on in the video, but this one, plenty good to pull on. So now I've landed 2 APs, and I'm trading off guns with Troy. Troy just got a shot on a really nice African Pompano, and he ended up stoning it. You'll see here in a second, there's a pretty cool thing we spotted on this fish.
Biggest AP with a tassel and everything.
That's what I was just thinking.
It's like a 30-pound AP with a tassel.
So that was pretty cool to see. Typically they lose their tassels, or whatever you want to call them, streamers. I've heard a ton of different names, but typically they lose those around 15 to 20 pounds, but that guy was pushing 30 pounds or so. So On this dive here, I saw this AJ from the surface. I went down and I was kind of lining up on him. I was hoping I was going to see an African Pompano, but I didn't, so I decided to make the best of my dive by shooting an AJ. So, blasted him. And just to give you an idea about the repetition of these dives, we're doing a lot of them, and there's 3 of us diving, so we're getting down there a good bit. And every time somebody sees the school of African Pompano, or even thinks they're in a fishy area, they'll let everybody else know that, hey, there's some African Pompano, hey, there's some sharks, hey, there's some yellow jacks, barracudas, whatever. And typically when there's a lot more fish, you'll see a lot more African Pompano. So that's what happened on this dive. I think Troy tipped me off. He said, hey, there's a couple African Pompano over there. And since the viz was so good, you could see them from a mile away. And I went over there, and I definitely found a lot of them. So kind of waited. If you saw, I waded through the school and picked out one that I really liked. He was a lot bigger than the other guys. So blasted him and headed up to surface.
Thank you.
So that was my 3rd African Pompano, and now I'm looking for some more. So I'm down current of the wreck here. Typically you don't see them that much down current, but we were not having any luck up current. So pushed on down, and I ended up bumping into the school, which is kind of surprising to me, especially with how fast the current is pushing. Typically when there's a lot of current, those fish like to be way upside of the wreck, but not on this occasion. There was, I don't know if you saw, but probably about 45 to maybe 50 of them sitting behind the boat. So I tipped Troy off, he went down, and I think he got a shot off on one of them. I think that was the guts falling down there. And I go down just to hopefully see one, and sure enough, there's the whole school again. Start swimming right up to me, and I can see they're acting a little skittish, like kind of moving around a lot. So I wanted to take a pretty quick shot here. Didn't want to pick through that school just because they've been shot at so many times. And I don't know if you saw, I shot through and hit the other one. Typically I wouldn't recommend that, but I was really confident with how I had been shooting with my gun that I was like, oh, I'm definitely gonna land both these fish. But unfortunately with that other gun, I wasn't dialed in enough to where I was like, oh, I'm gonna land this fish. So probably shouldn't have taken that shot with a newer gun, but you live and you learn. So now I've landed 4 of those bad boys, and I'm looking for another. It is still pretty early in the day. I think it's probably about 9 or 10 o'clock. So we're still in the good area of, or the good time zone of when you're going to see African Pompano. So I'm looking around. There's some chum. Troy brought, I think, 1 block of chum, so he started throwing that out. It was slowing down just a little bit, and we wanted it to be a little bit easier. So go down here. Pretty straightforward, honestly. Those fish came in pretty quick and got a really nice holding shot. So started pulling and headed up to the surface. So I was pretty happy with how that turned out, and I think Troy's still in the boat chumming. Kind of looking around. We were hoping to see some snapper and stuff like that, but we weren't really seeing much of all that. So kept diving for African Pompano, and typically these dives are anywhere from about 75 to 90 to 100. Just depends on where the school is, but today they were giving us some easy shots. We were at about 80 the whole day, and this dive isn't really any different. Just got down here and they swam up pretty quick. They were making it easy on us today. So I landed my 6th one. So after shooting that many of them, and I hadn't really shot a giant, I wanted to push around and hopefully find a bigger one. And that is what this dive is here. It's a longer dive. I spotted the school and they were staying pretty far away, but as soon as I see the school, I see a really big one at the front of it, and I knew I had to at least try and get a shot on them. So I'm looking around, doing a bunch of grunting, and I was thinking about just starting to head up, because typically if you don't see them, you don't want to stay down there longer, because then you'll end up pushing yourself farther than you really should. But I saw the school right at the cutoff where I was like, I might start heading up, and I knew I had to chase him because I saw a giant. So start swimming towards him, and I'm hoping I can get a shot on that biggest one. I had a couple of them to my right side where I knew I could have got a shot. I glanced over at him. I don't think you can see him on camera, but I looked over there, spotted him, but I just didn't want to take a shot on a smaller one, and I just hadn't gone the whole day shooting small ones to pass on a big one. So push, and I take a shot that I knew I would have hit with my gun, and I did end up hitting the fish, but unfortunately this gun's only got 2 bands and it didn't push all the way through them. I think the gun could have quite easily held a third, and I would have definitely landed that fish, but unfortunately it pulled off.
Pulled out.
What's that?
Pulled out. Do what?
You swam a long way horizontally. I was watching you, but I didn't want to chase you in case I'd like lose the fish.
It's a giant AP.
Really?
Yeah.
So I was kind of hoping I was going to bump into that fish again, but typically if you shoot an African Pompano, you're not going to see that fish again. It'll just stay really far away, and if you do see it, it's going to be pretty skittish. So kind of started losing hope when I saw this whole school, and none of them were really that big. So I just went for the biggest one in the school and took the shot. Ended up hitting him pretty high here. I think that shaft is starting to get some whip. I think we bent it on a couple of them. You'll see at the end there's a couple African Pompano with like Goliath grouper marks on them, and yeah, that's from just obviously shooting them and they get grabbed, and then the shaft gets bent just a little bit, but you can't really notice it, and it ends up making me shoot a little bit high on this guy here, but did end up landing him. I think Jordan goes down and gives me a backup shot if I'm not wrong. I could be wrong, but I think that's what happens. So now we're about 12 to 1 o'clock in the day, and it's getting to that point where you're not really bumping into any African Pompano anymore. So we started changing our focus from African Pompano to just anything you could shoot. Typically that'll be amberjack or any sort of snapper or anything like that. And on this dive, it was actually a pretty long one. I cut out a good bit from the beginning, but stay down here, and I was really still hoping to see a school of African Pompano, but they just weren't coming around. So ended up lining up on this AJ and took the shot. So this dive here, Troy went down before me, and he ended up spotting a mutton snapper at about 110. I think he was at like 80 when he saw it, and he just didn't feel like pushing down to it. Just because he wasn't prepared for it. He was diving for African Pompano still, but I was prepared. I go down here, and I ended up bumping into a Cubera snapper. As you can see, pretty sad. Not really sure what happened on that fish. It just shot right over him, and I didn't hit him. So it kind of sucks, but nothing you can really do. Just kept moving. I think I went to about 110 on that dive, so pushed down there, and I didn't get the shot I wanted, unfortunately. But now I'm on a new dive. I went down, saw this fish on the surface, and I knew I was going to get a shot on him, whether he swam up to me or I had to follow him really deep. But he gives me a really easy shot here. As you can tell, I'm shooting a different gun here. This is Jordan's gun he was shooting all day. And it's actually a pretty cool gun. It's a 2-piece gun. You take it apart, and there's like a whole carbon fiber plate / rod thing that goes through the whole thing. But unfortunately, as I get to the surface, that gun gets ripped out of my hands. Luckily enough, I already had my belt reel rigged onto it, because when I'm diving with other people's gear, I don't like to not be prepared. So I already had it clipped off, and as you can tell, that fish just starts taking that gun under. I asked Troy for some help. He starts helping, and he gets tugged under. So we fought this fish for a while. The other big amberjack that we shot got pulled into the wreck. So we were pretty happy that this one didn't get all the way down there. And we could see that he's starting to come up. And as soon as we can really see him, he just starts getting mauled by sharks. As you can hear, I'm not too happy about it in the background. But this kind of ended off our day here. We didn't really feel like dealing with the sharks, and we weren't really seeing any African pompano. We decided it was going to be an earlier day because we all had some stuff to do after, and called it a day here.
That is so sad. That was a giant.
Got some APs going in. Boom.
Nice.
Oh, I got my phone.
Quattro.
I was about to send it to CJ. Oh, it's right there. Okay.
Cinco.
All right, let him throw some ice. You want one more here?
Yeah.
One more.
Yeah,
Right here.
that one's perfect.
So that's 8 buried.
You good?
7.
Pretty sure it was 8.
I got it on video. We'll find out.
We'll call it 8.
8 sounds like a better number.
There you go.
Okay. Yeah, that's sick.
11.
There you go.
12. 13. 14.
Want one more?
Yeah, one over here.
Ice, right?
Yes.
And then you put the AP.
Throw some ice.
Yeah, then you put the rest of it.
How many is that?
16 total. It's either 15 or 16 total.
Pretty nice.
We have to go video evidence.
Yeah, we'll have to go off the video.
Good, right?
Yeah,
What do you want?
should be
One more.
good. It should be good. Just 2 more APs. And then cobia.
John, give me with this.
There you go. Let's go. Nice fish.
Do you need the AJ somehow? Oh, there's
yeah.
3 more AJs.
How many?
3.
4.
Oh, there were 4.
Say 4.
Trying to fit
Well,
two.
it's 3.5.
3.5.
A little.
Oh, yeah, okay.
3.5.
3.5. Where the other half go? That's the whole thing.
That's a half.
Yeah, it's a half piece. Oh, yeah. We can make it work. Yep. Then it's the coat. This guy, we can put him right there, maybe.
Yeah.
Go back there. Oh, man, he was the biggest one, too.
Sure. Stand them up maybe a little bit. Something like that. This guy.
There we go.
Look at that. That's all of them. Now the ice. Done. Look at that slime.
All right, Troy. So how much do you think I made?
What am I walking away with?
50,000. Easy. All right, y'all. Thanks for sticking around. We did pretty good. Got 15 or 16 APs. Sounds good. And then, like, I don't know how many AJs. Enough. And a cobia. Little guy right there. All right. Catch you in the next one.